Welcome to the NFL Week 10 Market Outlook. I'm your co-host, Brett Matthew, along with my partner, Judah Fortgang, and special guest this week, Caleb Betts, makes frequent appearances on the Book It stream, going on the Surgical stream, really focuses on props, so more of a prop specialist, whereas Judah and I, we dabble in props for sure, but wouldn't say that that's our primary focus. So bringing Caleb to the table adds a nice complement to what we do here, and kind of hear some of his thoughts as we recap Week 9, look at some of the market consensus power rankings, and then move in to previewing Week 10. So as we look at our Week 9 drive quality scoreboard, again, giving us a sense of how these teams played from a drive-by-drive perspective, from an earned points perspective. We'll be releasing a note on this actually pretty soon to give a deeper dive on exactly the methodology, give you more insight into the process and how we're kind of coming to some of these conclusions. But for the time being, again, just kind of evaluates these teams from a drive-by-drive perspective, aggregates that up, and try to give us a more accurate sense of how these teams actually performed, an X-ray seeing through that final score. Judah, anything when you take a look at this that kind of sticks out to you? Not representative of some of those final scores that we saw on Sunday?
Well, a couple of things are a little surprising to me. One, the Packers only at 13, considering they seem to actually move the ball fine. The issues were just red zone turnovers. But perhaps it really was only those drives that they were able to generate any offense. Another thing that really sticks out is that the Bears actually come out on top against the Dolphins here, which I think in most people's heads, like, oh, the Dolphins are the superior team. They were leading most of the way, right as our time-weighted average probability TWAP, as we call it, is 66%. And the sense is okay, of course the Dolphins won. But the Bears really put in a pretty good showing there. And I think our drive quality scoreboard really reflects that. I guess one other is, as we were talking about offline, the Cardinals Seahawks, which maybe is a segue into one of my favorite parts. But the Seahawks, again, didn't seem like they were really leading for most of the game, and that's reflected. But they really did dominate the Cardinals, and I think they really are a force in the NFC.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one thing that stuck out to me too as well is, again, why seeing our earned points metric, the TWAM, the time-weighted average margin, and the TWAP, the time-weighted average win probability metric, can just really fill out the full picture of giving you a sense of how this game played out. And it just provides you with so much more rich information rather than just evaluating a traditional box score. Because this tells you, one, immediately, all right, from the scoreboard perspective, this game was actually much closer than the final score, which says that the Seahawks won by 10. But then on the other side of that coin, in fact, from an earned points perspective, it says that the Seahawks actually definitively beat the Cardinals, in fact, won by more than 10. So really want to kind of bringing those things together to really give another accurate sense. And we picked the Cardinals last week.
Yep.
We were overweight the Cardinals in the NFL prediction game. Yet at the same time, we've been talking highly about the Seahawks. Last week, you talked about how maybe we have to change our entire perspective, how we're evaluating not just Geno Smith, but maybe Geno Smith is kind of like, kind of a broader reflection of how we evaluate quarterbacks moving forward.
Yep. I valued PJ Walker a little too high last week. He had a really good rating, and then they were playing into a Bengals defense without Jadoby, so without their top cornerback and without their slot cornerback and Mike Hilton. And, in the first half, he put up 0 points, pretty much a devastating offense, I think 6 total pass yards. And then Baker comes in for the second half and does exactly what I wanted PJ to do, where he drops, I think he had 2 or 3 touchdowns. He had 155 pass yards. And that's exactly what I kind of expected from PJ and from the Panthers offense. So one thing I'm kind of looking for in this week is, I think Bengals, this win isn't really all that deserving. I think if Jadobi stays out, I think that pass defense is really hurting, and Joe Burrow under pressure is really struggling as well. So I'm looking Bengals, and I'm kind of I think I'm going to be disrespecting them a lot this week personally.
Interesting.
Well, there's definitely been a lot of disrespect on the Bengals just on Twitter, writ large, kind of over the course of the season as well.
Yeah. No, now that you brought that game up, I almost take a different conclusion and say, like, we all had a lot of question marks following the Browns game about what this offense could do with Jamar Chase. Without Jamar Chase, excuse me. And they put in a really good showing. And it's not as if both things could be true. You could be selling the Bengals. And also, this team is not completely dead without Chase. And I think that game kind of proved that. The Panthers, not a great football team. Their defense is fine. They're not a pushover, and they're certainly not as bad as the banged up Falcons secondary, which the Bengals also put up a ton of points on.
Yeah, I'm actually curious why they're going to still be playing PJ Walker. At least I know that's what I've read, that they plan on still starting him again this coming week. I know when we were on the Game Trade live betting the games and we started to see the Panthers finally put up points, I was under the impression it was PJ Walker until I looked at a little bit closer. Like, the heck, they brought in Baker Mayfield. I thought Baker Mayfield was still hurt. He wasn't even capable of coming in. And that was one of the reasons why PJ Walker was even starting the game still.
I think they even called up Sam Darnold.
Mm-hmm.
They're all
is Sam Darnold active?
Yeah.
He's active, but I think it's going to be the PJ Walker.
Do you guys think like PJ Walker actually is legitimate? Like, is this a kind of read between the lines? This team is not trying to win games.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me say that
PJ Walker's the best quarterback.
Up until now, PJ Walker was playing like phenomenally for no reason. I mean, he was like starting so incredibly, and he throws over 300 pass yards given. He had a 60-yard bomb to DJ to end that game where they pulled out that loss against the Falcons in OT. And then he comes here, and I think this would be one of the best quarterback matchups you could have given how hurt this Bengals pass defense is, and he does nothing with it. So I guess it was just a little miracle spurt that has run its time.
Yeah, and we've seen that kind of time and time again in football. Those are all still pro quarterbacks. So some of the best athletes in the world are capable of putting in one or two kind of good performances. And that's actually what makes a really good quality backup. A player who can come in, fill in for one or two games, but be under no illusion that all of a sudden they've become somebody completely new or are all of a sudden, the next great thing. And I think, because I feel like PJ Walker's another one of those quarterbacks where we have enough tape on him to really understand who he is, what his limitations are, not necessarily like a Geno Smith phenomenon. But yeah, I think elsewhere, kind of looking at this, it pretty much is broadly consistent with what the final scores actually were. So some of the final thing I would say on this is just, again, looking at some of these TWAMs, the time weighted average margins, just some very tight TWAMs. So suggesting there was a lot of very close games. So teams that on average had a lead, or for the duration or for the majority of the game had a lead or a sizable lead, that still ended up losing the game outright. Obviously, the Titans kind of most memorable, but also the Jags, their time weighted average margin was 4, Rams was 2, Falcons was +3. What else do we have here? Washington was just -1. Texans was just -3. As we mentioned, Seahawks was just +1. So a lot of very close games that ended up extending in the end. And one of the things I wanted to mention too is just like that really just exemplifies how much value can really be captured by live betting. You don't capture any of this volatility by doing just the traditional handicapping and kind of evaluating static lines over the course of 6 days. The only way you capture that is by being active in the markets and live betting. And luckily, we had one of our best Sundays of the season this past week and actually did capitalize on a lot of these comebacks.
Yeah, no, that's right. And I think just to hammer this home, the time-weighted average margin, time-weighted average probability really go to suggest the volatility inherent in football games. And it's easy to lose sight, but something like this can kind of drill home and say there really was opportunity to kind of eventually get to the winning side. And things weren't so clear from the get-go like they were in the Ravens-Saints game.
Yep. Only 3 blowouts. Ravens, Panthers, Colts. Those are the only time-weighted average margins that were significantly blown out there. And then also, actually, the last one I would mention, is the Bills-Jets one. Time-weighted average margin for the Bills +3. Ended up losing that one.
Plenty of value, plenty of time to beat the Jets.
Yep, plenty of time, and which we never did. Which I don't dock us there, because really, actually, what I pat us on the back more so, as I think I was tweeting out, was not kind of trying to catch a falling knife on the Bills there. Because for any kind of standard, kind of maybe or more kind of new to the game live better, is what you might do is just, this is the better team and the line has fallen, so I'm going to try and take advantage of that. But you really have to evaluate how much has that line fallen. And that was the thing. The live line kept hugging the Bills pretty much all game, no matter what the deficit was. So, I mean, it was like 8-6, almost still beyond a full touchdown for 75% of that game.
Right.
And I was excited that we didn't fall, influence that. Week 10 consensus market power rankings, top 5. Bills remain number 1. In fact, the top 8 are all unchanged, in fact. So not a lot of market moving games this past week. So you have Bills, Chiefs, Eagles, Cowboys, Ravens still round out the top 5. And then you have Niners at 6, Bengals 7, Bucks 8, Vikings 9, Dolphins at 10. So not a lot of changes on a 1-week basis. In fact, the largest moves on a 1-week basis are some of those bottom tier teams finally getting a bit of a real sell-off. This is the biggest sell-off we've seen on the Packers. Finally, down 6 spots, down to 17. And actually what I love about this, Judah, is the market's downgraded the Packers 6 spots. Drive quality is actually upgraded.
Yep.
Packers. Because we were already so low. It was 29th. And now they're actually upgraded. 28th.
Which, by the way, I was thinking, like, okay, the market's going to be quickest to sell on the Packers. And I actually, of all the NFC teams, I think they actually have the best shot at turning it around. Maybe not now that they lost their entire team to injury. But it's funny that actually the draft quality kind of comports my experience, my general outlook.
What are your thoughts, Caleb, on the Packers? So they're a very divisive team. Standard deviation, also, Caleb, our standard deviation, this gives us a sense of how much disagreement is there across the market on this specific team. Higher the number, the more disagreement. And the Packers are pretty elevated there. ESPN 18th, PFF 10th, 538 18th, Football Outsiders 29th or 21st, in Predict 19. Again, we're at the market low at 28th. Have you made money fading the Packers, or have you ridden them at the wrong times? And I don't know, are you betting any props to the Packers? I mean, their offense is so pathetic.
Yeah.
Unless you're taking back props.
I took Rodgers last week, which did pay off against Detroit. I guess it did help that they were down. In the same sense, you could argue that he had one of his worst games he's ever had with the interceptions. But I certainly would not put him top 10 like PFF did. There's a part of me that knows that Aaron Rodgers is still a top 10 quarterback, and he's just so phenomenal to watch. But then you just have guys that are just not performing at the same level. Lazard comes back and he does well, but their depth in receivers, their offensive line is very weak. And at one point I put their pass defense pretty high, and I feel like it's fallen outside of their 2 cornerbacks. So it's kind of hard to pinpoint an issue for this team, but they just keep finding ways to lose rather than win. So it's a little disappointing.
It's more disappointing, Brett, is that you say there's not a lot of value betting on props. So I'm pretty sure you were all in on the Robert Tonyan over at 11.5 receiving yards last week. That is screaming value on betting Green Bay props.
True. And actually, that was a live prop. And that's one of the things I really want us to do is, especially at halftime when a lot of the games kind of go offline, is to really, scratch and claw for trying to find some props. And I did find that Robert Tonyan prop, but also was because it was so depressed, and that's why. Caleb, do you do live props? So trying to take advantage of how a specific game script is materializing or not in a specific game. And, maybe you have a projection for a certain kind of level for a certain player. The game is going awry for one reason or another, and then trying to take advantage of how those prop prices change live.
I mean, I will in a sense if it was already a player I was targeting before. Most of my current matchup tables will already factor if a team should be playing from behind or not. But if I see that and I was happening to already be high on this player because of their cornerback matchup or their rush defense matchup, and then they had targets and drops or whatever it was, and now they're from behind, it would be a spot that I would maybe dip more into. But typically I'm not looking in the market for new people that I have already scouted before the week. It seems it's a little too much effort for what I currently have.
Yeah. And actually, and I say that it's great that you actually call that out too, because actually that is part of the value premium right now in live betting. Is one, what I think I called out is one of the 3 Ds of what makes a really good live sports bettor. One of them is durability. It is a lot of effort, a lot of energy. It's just sucking away from you. And so much is going on to be able to kind of find all these value plays amongst a deluge of information just inundating you. That's part of that value premium, and it can be difficult for a lot of people still. So other biggest 1 week changers. So again, Green Bay downgraded 6 spots down to 17th. Giants down 3 spots to 25th. Saints down 2 spots to 19th. The Giants didn't even play.
Not play.
But I guess it's just the aftermath of their last loss, continuing to be downgraded, I guess, relative to other teams as well, kind of repositioning. Saints downgraded to 19th. Our drive quality downgraded them a spot, also now outside the top 10, but actually not as much as maybe you otherwise would have thought. Cardinals downgrade 2, Colts downgrade 2. Biggest upgrades: Jets up another 5 spots, now ranked 14th, creeping up across the board. Top 10 for Football Outsiders now, almost a top 10 for ESPN. PFF market low at 18th. Our drive quality has it at 13th.
Yeah. The Jets. I love the Jets. I mean, as a Bills fan, that is a phenomenal cornerback duo they have in DJV Jr. Yeah. Well, I make them in the sense that I bet heavily on Sauce Gardner and I bet heavily on DJV Jr. and them to perform every week. So Gabe Davis under was a big I was taking. And it was 13 yards. And I think just this Jets defense is phenomenal. Is absolutely phenomenal. So putting them, I don't know. I feel like this 14th is a little disrespected. I guess they have to prove themselves more a little bit because I also don't think Zach Wilson is that great, especially under pressure. But that defense can withstand any offense in the league. I want to see him go against the Chiefs for sure. But I thought that they matched up perfectly against the Bills, and this Bills losing was not that unexpected from a personal Bills fan.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Something I'd highlight with the Jets here is that if you actually look at what's being priced in next week, so their in-predict rating is 25th.
Yeah.
Though the market says they are 14th, which is the biggest difference of all the in-predicts, I believe. And maybe this is my time to rant a little bit, but something that I think is worth talking about when we talk about power rankings, which is that there's almost a strain of thought which says the spreads are the only kind of way of evaluating the fundamental value of a team, how good they are. And I think that's just one market, right? And I think maybe I'm just kind of expressing the value of what we've created here. But what happens in a spread game and the market that is inherent in that is different than, say, a futures market, where the Super Bowl can also be a determinant of team value. And what's happening with the spreads is it is saying, oh, next week the Jets play the Patriots. Zach Wilson has historically struggled against the Patriots. Therefore, we're going to make that same line. It's not a declaration saying the Jets are the 25th best team and the Patriots are the 15th best team. whatever the input has it at. But rather it's saying, no, there are unique inputs to this spread line that make it different for this market. I think these power rankings kind of give a better overview, more holistic overview of like actually what is this team's fundamental value by sourcing in a whole bunch of different metrics and groups that can kind of give us a better full picture. I think the Jets are around the 14th best team or draft quality as them 13th. And I think to Caleb's point, their defense has really been good. And like Zach Wilson is the thing that's kind of stopping them from even getting higher than that.
Yeah, I think it's definitely the Zach Wilson factor that's creating even hesitation on my part, I know, at least, from wanting to upgrade them even more meaningfully so. We look at the standard deviation, they're definitely one of the higher numbers there, so one of the bigger disagreements. Seahawks still almost week in, week out continue to be one of the teams with the highest standard deviations, just massive disagreements across the board.
And the Jags. Same thing. There's also a Twitter discussion today that
these three teams, the Seahawks, Jags, Titans, almost every single week.
Every time. It's like the Titans continue to outperform their record. They do it every year. And like the Seahawks, how slow are we? What does Gino have to do for us to actually upgrade meaningfully the Seahawks? How is their in particular rating 20th? 20th? What do you need to stop? Like play at a top 1 level instead of a top 5 level? What is fluky about it? There's nothing fluky about it. I don't see why you can predict and say, oh, this is not going to stay the same, other than like you're clinging to a product that's clearly sinking. Right? Like Geno Smith is not the same quarterback. Obviously, the Seahawks are not the same quarterback. And the Jaguars, they haven't been covering, and their efficiency might look good, but they keep shooting themselves in the foot, and they keep not beating the spread. I can understand why it's a little bit more hotly contested with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some of the biggest agreements, Bills, Bears, still very low.
Too low.
In fact, there's a lot of agreement.
I think the market's just slow to build in the Fields upgrade.
Very slow. I mean, so our drive quality, if you want to use drive quality as some sort of a leading indicator, we are a market high on the Bears at 19th. Market ranked 29th still. And again, broad market agreement that's within that range. ESPN 27, PFF 28th, 538 27, Football Outsiders 28th, Impredict 28th. So just still the market rating them as a bottom 3 team. And we could see that as we move into, week 10, still not even getting kind of that traditional full 3 points, being at home versus a division rival like the Lions, which is where we got them now. And they're a bottom 3 team as well.
Which, by the way, part of the reason I liked them last week was they were ranked 32nd or 31st.
Yeah.
It's like, they can't be that bad. These teams keep flip-flopping. Who's the worst team? They're never actually as bad as people think.
Right. And the Texans covered last week too as one of the worst teams. As a market consensus worst team.
Yeah. How's my audio? Am I good now?
Sounds good. Yeah, and very clear.
Perfect. Yes, Bears. I'm kind of loving the Bears, except for their offensive line is absolutely horrendous. Fields is making it work, but until the Bears get their center back, because they're playing their backup Mustafa, who is, I think, the worst rated O-line in the league, offensive lineman in the league. Absolutely terrible. But that's kind of the only issue I'm really seeing outside of them trading all their players. They're playing pretty well for that defense that's being pretty much sent out away. But Justin Fields is looking great, so I kind of like the team.
Have you been capitalizing on any of these Fields props kind of ahead of the steam that we're starting to see in it? I know I was betting Fields props 2 or 3 weeks ago, back when it was still mildly palatable, in the 30s, low 40s. Last week, it was already into the mid-50s. And, of course, now he goes for 130 yards. Yeah. But each time, it keeps creeping higher and higher and getting harder to stomach. How are you seeing that?
Yeah, so I've gone back and forth on him. And when he played Dallas, I faded him completely, and he went under. And then going into Miami against a pretty terrible or underperforming pass defense, and He goes over, which I capitalized on. It was interesting. I kind of was going to initially go for Mooney, but I was intrigued on how Chase Claypool would work into this offense. But seeing
And
him,
that was a bit of a dud, right? He got like 2 catches, 30 yards or 20 yards.
yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting for sure because
Still
Chase,
early too.
yeah,
Very early.
Chase Claypool's a guy that I feel like has a really large catch radius, and I think he's actually better than what Bears fans hope or kind of like are now expecting him to be. I think he is good. But Fields now is making these throws off the run that was struggling to make in the beginning of the season. So fading him, and I think his pressure rating is increasing a lot. So fading him in that regards is something I'm gonna try to avoid in the next upcoming weeks because I think he's working really well under pressure.
What about Vikings? This is another team, pretty high standard deviation, almost 5 spots of average disagreement. Drive quality has them ranked 9th. Market consensus rate is also 9th, so pretty much on market there. But across the board, ESPN 12th, PFF 8th, 538, a market high at 5th. Football Outsiders, a market low at 18th. So some pretty big deviations there. And it almost is really kind of reflective, I feel like, when you ask an average fan or an average sports bettor, their kind of disagreements or their kind of perspective on the Vikings. One sees opportunity to the upside, the other sees like massive opportunity to the downside, thinking that they're completely overrated. How are you guys thinking about Vikings?
I am definitely thinking the latter. And I think when they play Buffalo this week, it will be something that will be proven. Now, obviously, Buffalo is a really strong defensive team. But when you look at the Vikings, I kind of see them more one-dimensional than I think they are. But when they go into Buffalo and you put Justin Jefferson in a slot, he's matching up against Taron Johnson. In the wideout now, Buffalo welcomes back Tre'Davious White. And I think they're going to really struggle this week. And they're a team that they have a good defensive line and have good aspects across the board, but there's nothing that points to me where they can be exceptional. So I think falling outside of the top 10 is going to be something that will happen this week.
So Tre'Davious White is back this week?
Yes, I believe.
Okay.
Well, they hope so. Yeah, we have to. Dan, our resident injury specialist, let us know. I think the Vikings are almost. We can go to the games after this. In a sea of uncertainty, which is the NFL this year, right? Like we know exactly what the Vikings are. Kirk Cousins is the paradigmatic average quarterback.
Yeah.
Okay. The Vikings are going to allow teams to when they have a lead, they're going to allow teams back in, and when they're down, they're going to find their way back. It's the same thing every year. But in this NFL environment, that might be top 10. And we know exactly what we're getting with the Vikings. It is the most stable part
Stability
of the NFL this year. Yeah,
stability
and
has a premium this year.
Exactly, and that might work in the regular. I think Caleb, you're right. There's there's little angles to the upside to say oh, this is a Super Bowl team. They could have a tremendous regular season and find their way to a bye in the playoffs. That's not crazy. Is it likely? No, but that is the kind of placing them in the larger NFL market. The stability of the Vikings is really benefiting them this year.
Yeah. I think one of the dangers of fading the Vikings as well is for a team that's 7-1 and still barely cracking the top 10 and a Football Outsiders barely cracking the top 20. I mean, the market is hesitant to fully buy in to the Vikings. If you saw 7-1 in the NFC North, I think you're rating this team probably a top 5, top 4, blindly.
Yeah.
But the market is acknowledging that. And in fact, it's discounting them.
Before the Josh Allen injury, they were 7.5 point dogs to the Bills.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's move on to NFL Week 10, Thursday night game. Falcons down to 2.5 at Panthers. I saw this hit at least 3, over under 42.5.
I think there might be some weather concerns. I heard very windy, very rainy, which may have driven some of the line movement. Important context to that.
What are you thinking about prop wise, Kayla? But there's an island game. Do you try to lean into some of these island games, or are the island games only the Sunday night and like Monday night, Thursday night, like as time to relax?
I don't know. I like prime time a lot. I like going like deep beyond the surface level. With AJ Terrell still out, correct? Their top cornerback. Yep. Darren on DJ Moore is still very capable. And one guy I've been liking for a long time is Terrace Marshall. And I assume, what's his prop at right now?
35.5 yards.
That's ridiculous. Yeah.
2.5 receptions.
Which is actually really interesting because he was higher last week against the Bengals. But I think his matchup is still very good now. He's going against the backup Falcons, who is a part of a defense that has been struggling, and they're bottom 5 in pass ranking. So I know Carolina is not very exceptional, but they go from PJ, who favored him a ton, which is the reason why I took him last week, where he had like 10 targets the first game. But then Baker comes in, and he throws to him for over 50 yards, right? So now I'm just like, oh, well, it doesn't really matter what Carolina QB they go with, because this guy is the WR2, who has the most favorable matchup on the offense. I think he's probably going to be my top look for tomorrow's game.
Gotcha. Good insight. What about, I think where like kind of the most square bettors are going to lean into here is like, this seems like a slam dunk, is like Cordarrelle Patterson. Obviously, Joe Mixon just destroyed the Panthers, 5 touchdowns. Patterson comes back last week, looks good. His rush yards, 54.5 right now, receiving yards, over 6.5 catches. Or receiving yards, no, 6.5 receiving yards. Wow, that seems really low, actually. You see any value there or overpriced?
Yeah, well, so last week he was supposedly working back from injury, and then he had a really good workload with Algier. It's interesting to think about where the Falcons will go, because there are 3 running backs right now. I think Huntley is also a pounder, and they have 3 running backs that I think are kind of capable. But in a game where Falcons, they have a really good red zone defense, and their defense matches up well enough to pick Carolina to a game where they should be ahead, that provides a lot of value for Patterson. I mean, he runs hard. So Carolina's not going to be really strong in any aspect, slightly stronger in the rush game, but certainly bottom 10 in both departments. So I think it's a fair price, especially if he's seeing an increased number of snaps. It just depends on if they're going to go for a committee this week or not.
Mm-hmm. You were going to say something, Judah?
No, I was just, I think that's right. Like the snaps last week, Patterson played 24, Algier 23, Huntley 13. It's almost a question of snap counts. I will say, though, props are definitely the way to attack this game, because I want nothing to do with the spreader total. This, I think, is a classic spot of 2 bad teams you don't want to touch.
Yeah. Have you thought about any sort of SGP yet for this?
No, if anything, I'd probably, if PJ Walker is playing, I'd lean into maybe, and the weather is okay for deep passes, I can lean into DJ Moore catches long touchdown game. Well, both these teams are kind of explosive.
Yeah.
So I can lead to some fireworks.
Seahawks, Bucks. Seahawks out to a full +3 now on DraftKings. A little bit juiced. I know it's opened short 1, has been creeping up over the course of the week. Market still believing in the Bucks as a top 10 team. Drive quality down there at 18th. And still not wanting to buy into the Seahawks fully. Still market consensus power ranked 16th. And in fact, we don't even have the market high. Drive Quality has the Seahawks as a top 6 team. Football Outsiders has them as a top 5, and Football Outsiders has been ahead of that trend. This would suggest, this is in Germany. Yeah, this is in Germany. This would seem like Seahawks, especially if you're getting the 3.
This I just said on the forecast, famous last words. This is my favorite alt line play of the year by a lot. By a lot.
So you think the Seahawks are just going to destroy the Bucs?
The Bucs are not good. I think it's a material mispricing in every
Yep.
such way. And like I think I have a very good sense of what's being sourced and what's being priced in, and I want to fade that so hard. Okay, first off, if you go back to our power rankings for a second, the disparity is even further in the Impredict. Right? It's 20 versus 6, I believe.
Yep.
20 versus 7. Okay. You can like cite any efficiency metrics. I've got like a few, and I wrote this up on PFF. But just like our drive quality has them 6 versus 18. The Seahawks are 8th in EPA. The Bucs are 21st. Seahawks score on 44% of their drives. The Bucs 35. That's a difference of like 5th best versus 20th best. The Seahawks punt on only 30% of their drives, 7th best. The Bucs 26th. You get the idea. That obviously the Seahawks are better. But here's what's particularly strong in this case is that the Seahawks are a team full of rookies. In the same way that we just talked about how Justin Fields has improved, that makes sense. Second-year quarterbacks get better as the season goes along. In the same way that the Seahawks were starting Abraham Lucas and Charles Cross, both rookies at their tackle positions, they're going to get better as the season goes along. That's what happens with rookie players. They're also starting Tariq Woolen and Kobe Bryant, quarterbacks. They're going to get better as the season goes along. The opposite is true of Tampa Bay. Chris Godwin's not getting any better. Mike Evans is not getting any better. They're both just getting more hurt. They're old, and they're banged up. Right? Like, we should expect that there is some signal in an older team like the Bucs getting worse. And that's exactly the picture that's kind of painted. The Seahawks have gotten better in drive quality, EPA, whatever efficiency metric you choose, and the Bucs have gotten worse. So ultimately, like, what does this come down to? It's the same thing I've been saying every single week on this stream, which is the Bucs have fundamental issues. It's not that like Brady's not playing well. They have just some serious flaws. Namely, what I think most sticks out is that they're facing perfect coverage 50% of the time, which would have been the worst mark in the NFL. If the Panthers weren't the worst in the NFL, this is the second worst mark of the last 4 years since we started tracking this. And it's a reflection of a scheme that can't get guys open and receivers who themselves can't win separating. Added to the fact that this is a dreadful run offense. These problems aren't just going away. Like, we can't just wish away, it's Brady and the Bucs. We can't just wish that away. And the best part about this is it's two-sided. Right? It's like the Seahawks are still being downgraded as if like Geno Smith isn't playing to a top 5 rate, as if the Seahawks offense is not playing well, as if the Seahawks defense isn't getting better. I don't see why this is such a huge mispricing when I think actually the Bucs are the 20th best team and the Seahawks are the 6th best team, not flipped.
Yep. Everyone wants to deny their eyes and hold on very strongly to the preseason priors that the Seahawks suck and the Bucs are going to be elite. And it's taken half the season, and they're still not even properly adjusted for who these teams are. The Bucs just beat the Rams, who were also very low on, barely squeaked by. Time weighted average margin was still -2, and we have the Rams ranked 25th.
It almost perpetuates on itself, which is like the Bucs, Rams, and Packers are all really bad, and they started so high, and like it's just we're slow to adjust based on prior information, for better or for worse. And it's like, oh well, they beat the Rams. The Rams are okay. No, the Rams are terrible. 2 really bad teams played last Sunday, and the results showed. And like, I don't understand how the Bucs are still being priced the way they are. It just doesn't make sense to me.
What I actually loved about Geno Smith was through the pick 6, and then right after that led back-to-back 13-play, 75, 80-yard drives for touchdowns. Nice bounce back. What about you, Caleb? How are you planning on attacking this game in any particular way, or is it a stay away, or leaning into any Ken Walker prop? Yeah, I love that dude. That dude looks like a beast.
Who?
Ken Walker. Kenneth Walker.
Oh, yeah. What a dog. I would say the only thing that kind of concerns me is that Geno has kind of, for the last couple of weeks, gone through some easier pass defenses, and now is going into a top 10 Tampa Bay unit with like Jamel Dean, and so that's just a little concerning, though he has been playing really well. I think this is the week that I'm kind of expecting to see Leonard Fournette lose his job to Rachaad White. Leonard has been running terribly, and if I was going to pick a side, or pick a prop, I would definitely fade or go into Rashad White. I think he runs really hard. He was a 3rd-round pick that they had, and I think now will be the first game of the season where he's going to outsnap Leonard Fournette.
That's fair.
Bold, I like it.
Yeah, that's a good call out. So you think attacking some of those White props is a way to kind of capitalize on that.
And under Fournette.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You
And
make a good point too about some of the defenses that Geno Smith's played. So you're looking at Cardinals, Giants, Chargers, Cardinals the last 4 games.
Yep.
Elsewhere, Lions, Falcons. Really the best defense that he's faced thus far has been Denver and San Francisco in 2 games that actually are probably some of his worst, in fact.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Denver is going to be easily the most formidable that he will face. Now with Ronald Darby out, I don't know if that's still true, but at the time it was definitely true. But now he's had a long, so 4 weeks of pretty poor pass defense. Cardinals twice. What was it? Falcons.
I don't think the Cardinals are too bad.
Yeah.
I don't think they're lighting the world on fire, but I think they're a formidable defense.
Yeah.
Right? He's not facing the Lions every week.
One thing that's interesting is that overall they're ranked pretty poorly, but I've seen that against the top 2 wide receivers of a team, they're ranked actually pretty high, which is a very
they're getting killed by tight ends.
Yeah, so it's not.
I'm sure you've noticed that.
Yeah, 100%. But yeah, this will be one that I think might take him a little bit to adjust to. But Seahawks are definitely, as Judah said, definitely undervalued. I love that team.
And also this game, again, is in Germany. So there's always that X factor of weirdness that can create some, uncertain elements. Vikings at the Bills, down to 3.5 now. So it's obviously increasingly pricing in the fact that Josh Allen is not going to play. It's going to be Case Keenum, revenge game versus the Vikings. How are you guys thinking about this one?
I'm off.
Even you don't think the Vikings have value versus Case Keenum? That the supporting cast, the fact that it's still on the road, the fact that Vikings might be still overrated, even for a 7-1 team.
I'd so much prefer to bet this live. I got to get a little sniff of what the offense is going to look like. Are they going to run the ball a lot more? Does that change the entire nature of the Bills' offense?
Yeah.
I need to see it.
Yeah. Case Keenum, dude. Honestly, not a bad backup compared to a lot of teams. Very capable, and at one point was regarded one of the best backups in the league. Will he continue that? That's hard to say, but definitely a better matchup for the Buffalo offense than it was last week. And the Buffalo defense, in all regards, is destroying Minnesota today. And if they can shut out Jefferson, it is more of a question of can Case Keenum put any points on the board just to win in a little sad defensive game, and just hope that their defense can hold Minnesota to less than, say, 14, 17 points.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that angle. Yeah, I think the Vikings is probably just a stay away. To your point, Judah, I think this is way better of a game to bet live. I think anyone betting Minnesota is just playing it from a single angle, which is just no Josh Allen, huge downgrade Case Keenum, 3.5, still getting the hook. Whereas the Vikings, again, put only 7 points on the board versus Washington through 80% of that game. And they've just looked clunky all season. And the Bills obviously still have talent, still very well coached. And I imagine, I haven't read anything, I haven't seen anything per se, but that Case Keenum, I'm assuming, is getting all the reps and that,
Yeah, the whole thing's a little weird from Buffalo's side. I think Allen's injury is pretty serious. And I think it's being downplayed. And I'm going to.
Yeah, you're talking about maybe leaning into some division futures.
I bet division futures. I already gained some value when they reposted the Lions. I'd be worried about the UCL. He's previously missed time with it. It's not knowing from baseball. It's not a minor injury, and the whole way the team's PR situation is handling it strikes me as a little fishy.
Mm-hmm. All right, Texans at Giants. Texans plus 4.5. I know this was bet down from a so-called influential bettor on the Texans, bringing it down from 6 or so. In New York, over under 41, quite low. Texans dealing with their own kind of banged up, injuries. I read Pierce was on the injury report. Maybe Cooks is coming back, but where is his head in the game as well? I don't see a buy sign on the Texans here. They have the 10 days rest, but Giants are coming off a bye, so mitigated.
It's also pretty noisy in general.
Very noisy.
Yeah. Something that's not often talked about. It's like, it's a throwaway thing that you say, and we look at it. There's no real data to back that up. Certainly not. With the other team coming off the bye. And that's something that works on the margin. All which is to say, I agree with you. I don't see a screaming buy on Houston.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What about you, Caleb? Anything to attack here, or is this just a miserable matchup and find value elsewhere?
Yeah, I mean the trend that has quickly been forming is just how terrible Houston's rush defense is.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that when I look through my charts, that Saquon's going to be graded the highest of any running back. And Sanders and that whole committee goes well, and then Derrick Henry runs for 200 as he does every time he faces the Texans. So Saquon, now rested, who's been running phenomenally this year and should be in a game where he's up, will probably be the guy that I could easily see going for 120, 130. Will I bet it when I know that everyone else is going to take it? That's always the question with the Texans. But their rush defense continues to perform at a league worst. So who knows? I probably will. Sprinkle it as I always.
I think this is a way that if you want to play, again, the tail outcome of that with Barkley is like doing one of those SGPs and getting the plus money on Barkley over 115 yards or something like that. Plus 180 or something. Right now it's 93.5 juiced minus 125 on DraftKings is his rushing yards prop.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see anything on FanDuel to get. I don't see any props released.
Definitely one of the lowest totals on the board as well, second only to the Saints Steelers at 40. Chiefs plus 9.5. Our Jags, Judah, that we keep betting almost every single week. We cash the tickets. Definitely kind of made up for a lot of the losses and heartbreak that we've had over the course of the season this week. Leaning into them more and more as they were going down. Again, showed flashes of the same old Jags. I posted a few clips of me pulling my hair out about them stumbling at the 1 yard line.
Yeah. I think the most animated I got all year was when the Jags missed that field goal. Most animated in the negative sense.
Yeah. Because not only are we betting the Jags, you're especially leaning into those Jags alt lines.
Yeah.
5.5 being your critical marginal line that needs to be exceeded each time.
I'm going to 7.5 this week on Tampa, on the Seattle Tampa. But yeah.
Can the Jags win this one straight up? Or is this, obviously the Chiefs did not look good at all last week. Kind of a classic dud of a game from the Chiefs that you see 2 or 3 times a year from them every single year, especially versus the Titans. Mm-hmm. Or is this one of those games where the Jags are just totally outclassed? And this is going to be one of those where, the Jaguars have always kind of hung in for a while and then kind of fade. Is this kind of a similar kind of classic Jags, classic Chiefs? The thing is, what I don't like about the Chiefs is I don't like the Chiefs margin. I will never bet the Chiefs at margin. This one for me is a stay away Chiefs. I want to bet the Jags. If I knew,
Yep.
if I had not lost or made any money on the Jags, this was week 1, I would love the Jags.
Yep.
And it's still just a little bit of my own butt hurtness speaking that gives me any hesitation. Otherwise, I'd be loving Jags.
We're betting them circa.
Yeah.
I'm coming down with the strong fist there. Yeah, you gotta lean to the numbers here.
Caleb, were you hot on the Jaguars? So Jaguars was a very hot preseason team. Did you have elevated expectations for them in the beginning of the year?
I don't know why, but I love the Jaguars. I mean, every single week I think I still value them too high. But I love their receivers, and I love ETN. And I think T-Law is better than he was last year, and it's just something about that team. Just always in my mind, I have a natural bias towards. Will they beat the Chiefs? Probably not. I don't even think they'll be that close. But Chiefs defense is falling pretty hard. I think they're a good enough pass rushing team though to make Trevor uncomfortable. And with their top cornerback being L'Jarius Sneed, matching up perfectly with Christian Kirk in the slot, that's a really tough thing for Jags to get by. Definitely a stay away game because Chiefs are always just high spreads and I just kind of avoid them in general.
Yeah.
But if I was going to go somewhere, I would just expect ETN to keep running as hard as he can. And maybe that's enough where the game has long drives to where Jags can hang in that margin.
Yeah, I think that's it. I guess this is a learning game, but I do like the. I don't know if I'm going to bet their money line, but I do like the 9.5. Just Chiefs margin. I'd make this line like 5.5.
Yeah, I think leaning into Jags alt line here, I definitely love. Jags plus 3.5 plus 183.
I like it. See, this is something interesting is that I've never actually bet an alt line without the team winning. But I've never bet it short of 0.
Yeah, true. So if we did one of your, Jags -3 plus 454.
Yeah, it's intriguing. Give me a same game parlay. We'll see what they're offering. Matt Marshall.
I don't hate Jags -3 plus 454, especially if you're expecting the Jags potentially to kind of start a little bit hot. Jaguar and the Chiefs steps to start a little bit slow, which kind of is historically the precedent. And just wait for this live line to drip lower. Again, live lines always love to hang on to teams like the Chiefs, like the Bills. So it'll probably take a while for the line to meaningfully fall. That's another way you could potentially play that. And when you got a plus 454, you got a lot of budget to play around.
Yep. That's the only. Look, here's the truth. I can see the Jaguars winning this game. I think there's an angle for that to happen, which certainly means I like the 9.5. 5.5, it's plus 600. It's a little intriguing on FanDuel, at least for the leverage I can present.
Browns plus 3.5 at Miami. This one seems actually pretty steep. 3.5 reduced juice, leaning towards 4 on DraftKings. My initial impression here is lean Browns.
It's a live spot for me. I'm curious why you say Browns, though, and I'll finish.
It just seems like I agree. First of all, Miami is one of those teams that you really, if you really want to leverage up on a specific view, you got to wait live and then just lean into it hard once you see it start to materialize in one direction or the other. Because we've seen those games where the Dolphins offense just starts lighting it up. Wait, as you mentioned on the live stream, wait till after those scripted plays. Don't get romanced by the first 2 drives because that's going to be noisy. It's going to be potentially misleading. Yeah. But once you're out of those first, first 15 plays, and you get a sense of, is this going to be the Dolphins team that scores 17 points, 20 points? Then kind of maybe just lay off. But if they're rolling, like bet the Waddle props, bet the Hill props, like just lean into them. And even like starting off, I almost feel like rolling dice, especially for you, Jude, who's already made a ton of money on the Dolphins on SGPs, the plus 800s, plus 1800s, to a Hill, Waddle, kind of
I go too.
Najee Tra. 3.5 just seems like a lot for a team like the Browns, who have, outside of like the Patriots game of them just getting demolished. That was
really close.
Really looked ugly. They've been competitive in every game.
Yep. I will say not the only, but the main redeeming quality of the Miami defense is their rush defense, and that seems to be exactly what Cleveland leans towards. If Njoku is back, then Brissett could certainly have a good game. I kind of like Brissett, and I like that offense so far, and it's such an interesting game because Cleveland pass defense has kind of fallen behind.
Do we know if Denzel Ward's gonna be back?
That's a good question, but so far in the season, I do not know that. But
he's coming
so
back.
far in the season, he's kind of underperformed from his
coming back. Missed the last 3 games with the concussion.
Yeah, he's back though. Yeah, I mean sorry, Gabby, you can finish.
No, that's I don't really have a certain lean on this game. I just know that as far as defenses, Dolphins defense matches up better. But I do think Brissett is certainly capable to target their pass defense, their struggling pass defense.
Yeah. I mean, something we've talked about from day one with the Dolphins is matchups on both sides of the ball. Play a ton of man coverage, and they're so reliant on their wide receivers winning. I do think you're right to identify that the Browns don't really have the wide receivers to take advantage of where the Dolphins are weakest. Although I think David Njoku could spell some trouble while Stephen Key's back also. I really want to play
this is a very elevated total, 48.5, to maybe a potential, if you think there's going to be a quieter Dolphins game and the Browns aren't necessarily going to be able to take advantage of the Dolphins defense, under 48.5.
Yeah, it's hard, but it's hard to bet on the Dolphins. There are certain teams who could go off for 35 any week.
Yeah.
Right? I don't want to bet on a team. The Dolphins have that potential every week, but I want to kind of see how the game plays out before I make that bet.
Yeah.
It's just like, why would I gamble before the game?
Yeah.
We know what the Dolphins do. Yeah.
All right, Broncos plus 2.5 at Tennessee. I saw this hit 3. Now it's coming lower. 2.5 still elevated juice. Actually, this is the lowest total on the board at 37.
Ooh.
Is Tannehill, I assume, is coming back. I really liked actually what I saw out of the few, like, I don't know, what was it, like 6 throws from Malik Willis. He had like some that were dropped. He threw some dimes there. He has a very big problem with processing speed. Like if there's a little bit of a rush, he either wants to run or he has no idea what to do. Also, obviously has terrible wide receivers who are probably not getting any separation whatsoever. But I actually was pleasantly surprised from what I saw from him. Man, if the Titans weren't, 5-3 and actually still being competitive, could potentially still win the division, I would love if they moved to Willis, or even kind of do to like a Saints hybrid type thing and started to leverage more of Willis. Man, dude, when that guy turns the corner and starts to run, I mean, he looks like old school, he looks like a Josh Allen type, like linebacker moving with speed.
Yeah. I actually surprisingly like the Broncos in this game. I think something we've talked about a lot is actually how our drive quality has favored the Broncos more. So it's less true as the season's actually gone along, but it was certainly true earlier in the season.
Yeah.
I want to fade the Titans and their reliance on Derrick Henry. I think that the Broncos will be able to slow them down, especially if Ryan Tannehill's in and not 100%. And like Ryan Tannehill's mobility actually does matter. It's a funny thing to talk about because he doesn't strike you as the biggest runner, but like they do use him on option plays. And I think this is something that we're starting to learn more about. Henry's performances in recent weeks, I think have a lot to do with Malik Willis and kind of the gravity that a rushing quarterback like Malik Willis offers to it, and presents to a defense where like linebackers are going to freeze because of the threat of a Willis run, which I don't think is present with Tannehill.
Yeah.
I also I want to buy the Wilson deep ball variants. I think this is going to make a great clip when Jerry Jeudy or Cortland Sutton catches a 60-yard touchdown in a game with such a low total. I think that's the difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know. I'm intrigued about Denver's pass defense. I know they lost Darby a couple weeks ago, but they're still kind of holding on to that number 1 spot, which is certainly not the Titans' strength, but is something where now they can kind of load the box and be comfortable with the cornerbacks that they leave out. I do believe that Tennessee in this game is valued a little higher due to their Chiefs' performance, and Tennessee is not a team I'm ever really high on, just because I know their offense is so one-dimensional, given that it's a very good dimension. But I think one thing that I was looking to target in this game was I'm waiting for Melvin Gordon to be waned out of Denver's offense, and I think this is a good week for that to happen. I don't think he will perform very well, and Latavius Murray and someone I'm really high on is Mike Boone, though the team's not very high on. But I think Latavius Murray will have a very successful performance in relation.
What about Chase Edmonds?
Ooh, yeah, Chase Edmonds, new acquisition. Not really that strong of a runner, more of a pass back, correct?
Right.
That is very interesting. That's a good question.
Muddles the backfield even more there.
Yeah, running back committees are always just something I kind of avoid for obvious reasons. But I think Melvin Gordon is probably the weakest of those 3.
Okay, Lions +3 at Chicago. This is now 2 the 3. Was 1 early in the week. It was 1 on the look ahead. It's creeped up. I think it was maybe opened 1.5 after the games. Now it's crept up to a cheap 3 for the Bears. Reduced juice on DraftKings. I like the Bears here pretty definitively. 1, for the reasons that you mentioned when we were evaluating the market consensus rankings, Judah, which is I don't think the market's properly pricing yet the Fields phenomena. I think everyone's very well aware of it, but it's not bleeding through to pricing quite yet. I think it's feeding its way through props first. It's getting elevated pricing there first, but not bleeding through to the game level yet. Justin Fields rushing yards over under 58.5. So it's about 5 yards higher than it was last week, which was about 10 yards higher than it was the previous week. So it continues to kind of, again, drip higher and higher. The thing is, I don't even know why. I'd much rather, if you're going to play a Fields rush, might as well just lean into some of the alt lines, over 85 yards plus 200 or something like that, and just play, kind of, they're going to totally change, just really lean into that script. And we know the Lions defense is still one of the worst in the league. Maybe it's not the worst in the league. Maybe it's not historically bad, but simply like playing well against the Packers is not necessarily indicative of any material change. Although they did also shut down the Cowboys for about 60% of that game as well. So, some improvement from that defense, but I think the Bears are certainly more than capable of exploiting their weaknesses. And I definitely liked it much more so under the 3. I think Bears Lions in Chicago should be 3 pretty much any season. And so I feel less strongly about it at the 3. But if you get it under 3, I definitely like Bears.
Yeah.
You go, Gio. Sorry.
I was just gonna say this is volatility central, I think.
Yeah.
Bad defenses, offenses who put up explosive plays. I'm looking to bet this live and keep flip-flopping the sets.
Yeah, I'm hoping that people think that Detroit's defensive unit is better than it is after it picked off Rodgers 3 times, because I'm definitely thinking that almost for the first time this season that Chicago's offense is now actually having an advantage. So I'm really excited to see how Fields uses that because he's always been an underdog and going against really hard teams. And now he will have probably the least pass rush presence that he has felt so far. And he was, this pocket passer guy in Ohio State. So now I'm just really excited to see how it performs. I don't really know if I'm even going to bet it, and I might just watch it and just enjoy it. Just because I kind of have a bias to him, and I just, being from Chicago, so I just want to enjoy it.
Yeah, I actually always, for that reason, in fact, try to avoid having exposure on Bears games because I will lose money. But I think this is actually, obviously there's such a bias towards Fields running and not passing. Fields over 1.5 passing touchdowns versus a weak defense, plus 190. That's
intriguing.
Pretty attractive to me. Especially since we know Judah as well, Saints or the Bears, one of the better scripted teams in the NFL as well, putting points on the board on those first drives, second drives, pretty much every game.
Yeah.
Saints minus 1.5 at Pittsburgh. This was 2.5. I bet this on the look ahead line because it was Saints -1. I thought the Saints were going to look a lot better versus the Ravens, assuming this was going to go up to a field goal. I saw it reach around 2.5, but now it's back down to 1.5. Again, on the road, total 40. I think I still like the Saints.
Me too. I want to see if TJ Watt ends up playing. There were rumors of him playing, but I want to fade the Monday Night Football game that everyone watched and downgraded the Saints as a result. When I think it's pretty much the same story of why I outlined them in the first place last week.
Yeah. Nothing materially has changed, and it looks like from what I'm reading, it looks like TJ Watt is gonna play. So that's definitely meaningful since he definitely.
Yeah, I'm a little less bullish.
And that's probably maybe that's what's moved this down that point.
Yeah.
What about you, Caleb? Anything from you on this one?
It's interesting. I love this Saints defense, but with TJ Watt back, and I don't know, Pittsburgh is a defense that should be better than they are. I love Levi Wallace when he was on the Bills. I still like him as a cornerback. I like Minkah Fitzpatrick. And I think with TJ Watt as a pass rushing presence, this total makes sense. It would be very hard to see either of these pass offenses being successful against these opposing cornerbacks. So props could be, a fading of a receiver. But overarching, it's just going under in this total.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, I don't know. Maybe I do want to lay off this one just because I feel like the return, unless he's going to be limited in some way, shape, or form, one of the things we talked about in the preseason preview a lot, it's actually very well documented, is, the splits with, on-off with TJ Watt. And he dramatically changes the impact of that defense. And I think the Saints are still vulnerable to, a very strong pass rush. I don't like Dalton under pressure. And again, unlike your thesis on Geno Smith, Judah, I don't think that is applicable to someone like Andy Dalton. He is who he is, and he'll be able to put in some good performances, but then he'll be able to put in bad performances. It's exactly what he did in the late stages of his career with the Bengals. It's what he did with the Bears last season as well. He looked good and he looked bad.
I think he's very sensitive to pressure. I think that's almost the key with Dalton. Is the sensitivity to pressure. I'm also curious to see if the Saints are fully they've got a ton of injuries. I want to see if Marshawn Lattimore's back, if Travis Landry's back. I think it's a spot I'm currently lying off, but I can definitely see myself leaning into some alts, basically on the assumption that nothing's materially changed. From last week.
All right, Colts +6 at the Raiders. Colts looked miserable last season. Fired their coach. Fired their offensive coordinator the week before that. Just total chaos.
It's total chaos.
we're cashing our under tickets. We can just cash it. They should just pay us out. In fact, like what the heck? Stop sitting on it. I don't think it's hard to like want to touch the Colts. I feel like this is not enough points quite yet.
No, you can't touch the Colts right now.
It's truly gambling by betting on the Colts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, the Colts are just a terrible team. Horrible football team. Yeah, I guess I would be inclined to bet on Josh Jacobs because he was running really hard earlier, but then Colts, that's their strength on defense. Even though they're most certainly going to be down. So overall, I just kind of look at this game and I gag and then I move on. I'm not going to touch anything.
I like this as a teaser, like for sure. A home game for the
Like
Raiders
losing the
against
Raiders
a dysfunctional Colts team that doesn't have interest in winning right now.
Mm-hmm.
You can also just bet on the
typically, total. Yeah, typically I love to lean against like a common narrative that's being cited for anybody and anyone who's betting on this game.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just don't know if 6 is enough. Like essentially, if you like the Colts, if you want to gamble on the Colts, do you think you're going to get a better line live than +6 at some point in time? I think absolutely for sure.
Yeah.
Gamble then.
Because it clinks to the prior, yeah.
Cowboys at the Packers. Now, again, consistent with what we saw from our consensus market power rankings. Packers down and graded 6 spots this week, down to 17. Again, our drive quality actually upgraded 1 spot. Packers now +5 in Lambeau. This is a clear season low for the Packers versus the Cowboys. Total over under 43. Packers are now dealing with injuries on top of both now defensive injuries as well. Rashawn Gary out on top
Eric
of.
Stokes
out. Who else is out?
Eric Stokes.
Eric Stokes also out. So I just feel like this is just like you still haven't caught the bottom yet in the Packers, and the Cowboys run away with this. But I feel like I think any kind of square sharp better has to be betting the Packers here. And again, I'm not saying that's a bad reason. I'm just saying I feel like this is like, oh, this is just too many points. Packers and Lambeau, it's over +3. Now you're getting a few extra points. Got to bet Packers.
I thought I was going to have to talk you off of Green Bay. That's like trying to buy the dip. I'm glad we agree on the fact that actually I think this thing's going to ship a little lower first.
Mm.
Yeah.
I
would be all over the Cowboys personally. I mean, I love their pass defense. If Rodgers goes off a Detroit game, now I know that some of those interceptions were not his fault, and I do still think of him as a phenomenal quarterback, but the Dallas pass defense unit is so much stronger, top 5 in the league. And one thing that the Packers did against the Bills was they just turned entirely to a run game.
Yeah.
So I'm intrigued if I can get away with going against Aaron Rodgers this week after taking him last week, and hoping that either, the pass defense is good enough or that they just go full Aaron Jones again. So that'll be intriguing to look for.
Yeah, I really liked the Aaron Jones angle versus the Bills. And in fact, I played a lot of Aaron Jones props, especially since it was a standalone game. The thing is I won all my rush bets, but he actually didn't get as much receiving exposure as I thought he was going to. So I kind of lost those. I ended up actually kind of basically breaking even. They don't got any rush props up for this one yet. But I want to see what Aaron Jones props looks like.
I think Jones is also dealing with injury. Yeah.
Also dealing with injury.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the question also is, has the market responded to the Cowboys yet? We don't have a lot of Dak games. And I think they can legitimately be a great offense like they were last year. Also see them as like a team that can really blow the Packers out. Like if the Packers are really bad, if their drive quality suggests at 28th, especially with a hurt team, and like Dallas really runs up scores, which makes it an intriguing all spot, especially if Dallas jumps out to a big lead early. You can probably get a middle because the line's gonna move quickly with Dallas.
Yeah.
Tony
Yeah, Dubs was in a walking boot. Aaron Jones was in a walking boot. And we know like Dubs one of those newer wide receivers that Rodgers was actually demonstrating a little bit of chemistry with. I know after the Bills game, I was talking about how I feel like they took like a next step in the broader kind of development of chemistry. And then, he gets hurt and misses most of the game versus
I took his longest reception prop. He has a 18-yard catch on the first play of the game, half a yard short of the prop, and doesn't play on Thursday.
What about Tony Pollard? Do you guys like Tony Pollard? Running hard.
I mean, I definitely like him more than Ezekiel Elliott.
Yeah, it's always hard because they don't give him any volume. A lot of these things are volume based.
Yeah.
But
certainly a prevalent weakness of the Green Bay defense. So if we're thinking that Dallas can hold ahead, and
that's true too.
Tony run.
Yeah. Yeah, if they can extend the lead, hold the lead, then they turn more to the run game, and Pollard benefits from that. I could see that. What is I mean, I haven't really looked at him. I mean, what do Pollard props usually look like?
They're usually like heavier on receiving. He'll go like 35, 37 receiving yards. Rush yards would be lucky to break 50. Then with Zeke out, I think I saw him upwards of 65, 70, which he covered with ease because he was running incredibly well.
And that's how you'd play this one?
Yeah. I mean, with Zeke back, I would just hope that they split. And I think if he's sitting at low 50s, it would definitely be a number that I'd be intrigued by.
Gotcha. All right, Cardinals at Rams. Cardinals plus 1.5. Division game, very critical if the Cardinals want to maintain any sort of competitiveness in the division and in the season writ large. We're starting to see some clunky Cardinals performances, similar to what we saw last year, even with DeAndre Hopkins back now. One of the things that I'm kind of sad about why we picked, Cardinals again. Cardinals have been a team that we've actually lost a lot on this year.
Yep.
Drive quality hates them. Ranks Cardinals 30th, clear market low. Football Outsiders actually pretty close. So it actually has the Cardinals ranked 29th too. Market consensus rank on the Cardinals is 23. So we're meaningfully lower than them. Again, asterisk. Most of that is backwards looking. Doesn't have DeAndre Hopkins, but he wasn't a meaningful contributor in the game versus the Seahawks. Pretty much went under all his props as well.
Yeah. Sure. There's
Ramsey. Sorry. I was just saying.
No, I was going to say there's some big injury news here. Both Matthew Stafford and Kyler Murray's statuses are in doubt. Stafford in the concussion protocol and Kyler missing with an injury, which I think happened at the end of a couple years ago. We had a similar John Walker and Colt McCoy situation, which could be what we're having here, in which case I want to stay far away.
Oh, yeah. Then it's just a potential live betting game and see how some of the trends start to play out.
Yeah. Then the under 41.5 seems wonderful if we have two backups, but I doubt that would be the case.
Yeah, and again, the Rams, without Stafford, it would change it materially, but Rams, one of the better scripted teams. Cardinals, one of the worst scripted teams.
Getting better.
But getting better?
Yeah, they've definitely improved. Hopkins came back. They went from the worst team to they're creeping up access every week. Yeah, so a lot of noise around this. I guess you gotta kind of wait to see.
I mean, if Stafford's in concussion protocol, especially with the sensitivity around that now,
It seems like he's not going to play.
Yeah. Wow, I don't like either of these teams. The Rams are so underperforming, and Cards have this O-line issue that Kyler can't really get past. Though Rams defense is, I guess it's stronger. I've been fading Allen Robinson for a long time, so Cardinals in their cornerback duo. I just expect another high volume slot for Cooper, and I think Allen Robb would probably be my only fade in this game.
Yeah, I mean, we've been super bearish on the Rams, been fading them pretty much all season, which has been profitable. The thing is we kind of keep leaning into potential ceiling outcomes materializing for the Cardinals, and that just doesn't really happen. And it's been costing us, certainly in Circa. Chargers +7 at the Niners, Sunday Night Football.
What's the injury news on Mike and Keenan?
They're both going to be out.
Really?
Williams for sure.
Thing?
Probably. I think Keenan is going to play. It's not going to be fully out there.
I targeted Palmer a lot every time one of them's out, and he's done well so far, but now Charvarius Ward is a very formidable opponent. I feel like the spread is pretty accurate, given the weapons that Chargers have. I guess Carter would be the only Chargers receiver that could do a little something, assuming Herbert is throwing for 250 plus as he does every week.
Yeah, I think this total looks high, 45.5. Given the Niners defense, given the Chargers offensive woes, and someone like, he kind of force feeds the ball to Josh Palmer. We saw tons of drops in the previous game, both from Everett and Palmer, some of them leading to turnovers. First, not necessarily an opportunistic defense at all from Atlanta, and still barely squeaked out the win. And again, couldn't really meaningfully move the ball. And now again, still now going up against obviously a much more formidable foe. Mm-hmm. Chargers have already shown a propensity to get demolished. Got demolished by the Jags, got demolished by the Seahawks. So they can get demolished.
Yeah, this is probably, out of those spots, this is probably the most predictable of those. I think the line is fair, given what.
Yeah, I wouldn't bet the 7. I would bet Niners alt if you like Niners.
Yeah.
What about you, Judah? You think, are you going to?
I never thought that the
day would come.
Herbert day. I was just looking back. I was in week 3 last year when I bet the Chargers against the Chiefs as touchdown underdogs. I said I do not think there will ever be an instance of Staley Herbert 7-point dogs, but I think it's warranted in this spot. Mm-hmm. I do. I'm not as enthusiastic about the Niners alts as you are, only because I think Herbert keeps them in the game, no matter what. That's kind of been the MO. And I don't think the Chargers defense is as bad as everyone's making it out to be. Mm-hmm. But it's hard to make a case for them when Herbert is playing hurt, hasn't been so effective, and the team is just decimated by injury.
Yeah, but again, that's also too. Like I don't know if it's not Herbert's MO to lead teams back or whatnot, because again, got demolished by the Ravens last year, got demolished by the Texans last year. Yes. Like this team gets demolished.
Well, they didn't get demolished by the Texans last year. They lost by 1.
They lost by like 20.
The Texans.
Yeah, so when Rex Burkhead put up like 200 yards rushing or something on the ground with them.
41-29. I think there's like a 6. Either way. Yeah, I mean, like in recent weeks, it's been Chargers go down 14-0, 10-0, they come back. Yeah, it's fair. It's fair, and I guess they do have the wheels to come off, but I think those games were a function of like Staley variants going the wrong way, and we haven't had any of that this year. Right? It was
Yeah.
like they failed.
That was more
fourth
so a
down in
consequence
midfield.
last year. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and I don't think we had that last. Like they're playing a more conservative.
Yeah, now they're
style
just bad this year.
They're just not good. Yeah, they're just totally
Which is
decimated.
worse.
Rex Burkhead had 22 carries for 149 yards and 2 touchdowns last year.
Oh my lord.
Unbelievable. Yeah, it's. I don't know.
Yeah, I
don't
would say
wanna
again,
touch
like the other part of it is just like I don't know if I necessarily like the Niners to necessarily be the type of team to run away with this particular game from the offensive side, which is why I think another proxy play off that narrative potentially playing out is playing the under.
Yeah.
Even playing into your thought process, Judah, the Chargers defense not being as bad as maybe the market's pricing it.
Yep.
I wonder if McCaffrey props have gotten out of control. I don't see any up yet.
Yeah, that is such a high total. I mean, it would have to be like fully from San Francisco success because, I mean, Eckler has a really hard matchup, and then you have Palmer with a really hard matchup, and it's like, so what do the Chargers have to work with? And if San Fran has a very positive matchup on their run game, then they could just have really long drives.
Yeah.
Especially if they're aiming to run out the clock.
Remember, wasn't it? It was like 46.5 Niners Chiefs.
Yeah.
Obviously, I had a much more explosive offense.
Yeah, I mean, that was incredible. Mahomes just decimated that offense, or that defense, that pass defense. But
all right, last game on the board, Monday Night Football, Commanders plus 10.5 at Philly. Over under 44. Pretty low total for such a high spread. We haven't really made any money on the Eagles this year, and they've covered a lot of numbers still. Again, we weren't low on the Eagles, but kind of have been pretty reticent to necessarily buy into them at any point in time. So that's kind of cost us from just not taking advantage of their opportunities over the course of the season. But I don't know. This seems like a little bit high. Again, given a season where there is a lot of parity, and now we're even seeing some of those top tier teams not covering spreads as those spreads reach kind of really elevated levels. I think I don't know if I like Washington enough to necessarily bet them, but I mean, I'm not. I am once again not betting the Eagles.
Yeah, I mean, this was a similar scenario to the Texans where they had their high spread, low total. Eagles pass D continuing to look phenomenal. They're strong all the way to their slot corner, so I don't expect Heineke to do anything. McLaren has an issue on both sides of the field with Bradbury and Slay, and then Samuel with Maddox, who was the whole starting cornerback last year, and now is their third stringer. Like, that's just how phenomenal that defense is. Eagles to continue being undefeated, almost certain.
So you think maybe under 44?
Yeah,
Could be a potential way
it
to
would
play
be
that
the
out.
same with the Texans, where it's just fueled by whoever opposing the Philly is, unable to put on the board.
Sure.
But I will say that one thing I targeted for the Texans, which could be almost similar for Commanders, is that Eagles promote this running back committee, and Gainwell has seen a significant increase in carries. He's been running really well. So I do like Gainwell a lot.
Yeah, good call out, actually. So Judah, Arjun, also one of our buddies, was in town in New York last week, and we watched that thriller Eagles-Texans game together, and we actually were betting the Gainwell props, which he hit easily.
Easy.
Yeah. So
Early.
Yeah, good call out there. Yeah, because he was only like 21. We took him rushing, receiving combined over 21.5 yards.
Oh yeah.
I think he did it, rushing alone. Yeah, it's a good call. I think looking into Gainwell props is another way to potentially take advantage of this. I don't see any of the rush props or receiving props out yet. A little bit too early still, but yeah, I'm gonna target that for that game as well. All right, that wraps up our NFL Week 10 market outlook. A lot of insights, a deeper board this week than I had expected. Kind of the games kept going and going. Thanks for joining, Caleb, and offering us a lot of like your prop insights. That was awesome. Yeah, thanks for joining. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you next week, or we'll see you on Sunday during Game Trade. Caleb, I don't know if you've ever joined us during that. I know you don't necessarily lean into the live betting, but definitely join us.
Now's the time.
Yeah,
that's the time.
I've seen your guys' clips that you post, and it looks like
yeah, it's super fun and profitable, which is the most
That's
important.
right. It's a killer combo.
All right. Yeah. And that's why it would be awesome to have like some more prop specialist as well, who, kind of has their eye on that, because that's not, again, always something Judah and I are looking into like very closely. Kind of just happens by happenstance or kind of like on the side of our eyes. But that is just where there is like some of the juiciest opportunities and certainly some of the most mispriced risks as well. Because again, there's just not a lot of eyes on them. So again, yeah, thanks everyone for listening. See you on Sunday during Game Trade live betting. And that's closing bell.